to that for one chance, just one chance to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
To Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. Some news to get into, and a lot of it surrounding a lot of these shootings that are going on, and the couple that went on the shooting and being linked to the Bundy Ranch. A lot of it not being talked about. Hey, they were also kicked out of the Bundy Ranch. The focus isn't on that. It's the fact that they were at the Bundy Ranch. And we already know what all this is leading to with mainly the Democrats, but the establishment, the elitist. I have one here out of guns.com. California Democrats bring pause for safety gun control bill to U.S. Congress. It says here in a joint effort by U.S. Representative Lewis Capps and Senators Barbara Boxer and Dianne Feinstein, a bill that would provide for gun violence prevention orders was announced Thursday. This measure is, and this is from last week, but this measure is similar to one introduced in California last week on the heels of Isla Vista shootings that would provide a framework for the temporary seizure of guns from an individual at the request of their family or friends. The concept is being referred to in the state as a gun violence restraining order. Capps met with Richard Martinez, the father of an Isla Vista shooting victim and growing voice in the gun control movement, before she proposed the measure to the U.S. House. Our community in Isla Vista has been appended by this horrific and violence, Cap said. We need reasonable common sense solutions so that we all feel safe in our home and out in our communities. Now, let's stop right here and just analyze this real quick. Well, cops kill innocent people and rarely do much time. Why does it always seem they want to use the wording reasonable common sense solutions? Because, well, reason would look at facts and say, well, California has pretty strict gun laws compared to many places. And they still have this horrific act that other places that have higher gun rates don't have. Well, let's look at Chicago and how good the gun control there is working. Common sense measures would say that, well, when you take the guns out of law-abiding citizens' hands, people that aren't out there to cause harm to others or rob others, you create a victim. And again, it's just propaganda and rhetoric, and the use of wording seems to just appeal to the people that really don't care to look beyond what these politicians say. Don't look at any facts. They're robots. They repeat what they hear. We're going to see a lot more of this. And that article, you can read the rest of it at guns.com. And we don't hear too much about when a law-abiding citizen has a gun and they're able to protect themselves. And hopefully this one will play. So let me cue it up here. And this one is from gunsaveslives.net. And let me know in the chat room if you don't end up hearing this.
Releasing chilling details of a late-night shooting in South St. Louis that left one person dead and injured another, and a neighborhood is now shaken up. News 11's Chris Renier has been working the story all morning long. He has new information this noon. Chris, what are we learning?
Well, the investigators say it all started with a teenage girl being confronted by two armed men in front of her home. Then it ended with one of the suspects dead and another hospitalized. Take a look at the scene on Newport near Neosho. This is where it all went down about 11 o'clock last night. St. Louis police say a 17-year-old girl was outside of her home getting something from a car when two armed men confronted her and demanded that she return to her home. The girl's father saw the suspects walking his daughter into the house. That's when police say the father, a 34-year-old man, got his gun and fired several shots at the suspects, hitting both of them. The girl's mother, also 34, got another gun and fired around as well, not hitting either suspect. The first suspect was pronounced dead at the scene. The second suspect ran away and contacted his brother to take him to the hospital. Neighbors heard several gunshots. One of those shots crashed through the front window of Jessica Swartz's home across the street. The bullet then lodged in a wall just above where Jessica was in her bed, getting ready to go to sleep. We talked with Jessica earlier about the frightening experience.
And then I heard the gunshots and heard glass break. I felt debris, jumped to the other side of my bed and waited for it to stop, and then called 911.
Police are identifying the suspect who was killed as 31-year-old Terrell Johnson from North St. Louis. The second suspect, a 33-year-old man, is hospitalized in critical but stable condition with gunshot wounds to both his chest and thighs. Police say he will face charges. There was also a 5-year-old boy in the home. Fortunately, nobody in the house was hurt. Back to you.
So, you know, who knows if they were just going to take her in the house and rob the house, whether they were going to try to rape her, or what was going to happen. But evidently, that protected someone's life. And we constantly see these anti-gun groups use nonsense and fallacies to argue against it. And what really is getting me about the couple out there in Vegas is they're connecting it to groups like the Bundy Ranch protesters, again, grouping people in together, and also attacking people like Adam Kokesh, and I seen that coming out of USA Today. And Adam put out a video here. Is Adam responsible for Vegas cop murders? So I'm going to play that.
If America had its shit together, when something bad happens, we'd blame the right people. And we don't. And since this time, in the wake of the police shooting in Las Vegas, the guy who preaches universal nonviolence, yeah, right here, is being blamed. You're not going to get away with it this time, USA Today and SPLC. From USA Today, Las Vegas cop killing couple's message of hate. After storming a restaurant and killing 2 police officers, Jared and Amanda Miller placed a swastika and a "Don't Tread on Me" flag on the officers' bodies before going to Walmart and taking more lives. And, of course, it was only when they were confronted by someone trying to stop them that they took someone else's life, but that's besides the point. Jared Miller and his wife Amanda loved supervillains. They walked about their Las Vegas apartment complex dressed as Batman villains, the Joker, and his vampy sidekick, Harley Quinn. Amanda Miller's Facebook profile photo shows the pair in their Joker costumes. Police say it was a window into the couple's troubled lives. Underneath their painted faces, they were a homicidal rage against authority. Yeah. Now, it couldn't possibly be that in America, authority has become a homicidal institution against freedom. Perhaps? No. Such rage would have to be totally misplaced and completely unfounded. Authorities said Monday. Well, first of all, let's just point out how confused these people are and completely irrational. I don't mean because they killed cops. I mean because the Gadsden flag is generally a symbol associated with the American Revolution, freedom, less government at best, the Constitution, things like that, Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence. And the swastika is associated with National Socialism, like we're going to really rally around a leader and be patriots and have socialized medicine and welfare and, a lot of the Obama administration policies. All right. Then the couple fatally shot another man in a nearby Walmart before officers cornered them. At that point, police said Amanda Miller, 22, shot her husband and then herself. As the public reacts with horror, investigators are trying to piece together details on how the couple graduated from anti-government rhetoric to murder. Well, first, let me just point out, if someone is going around, let's say someone's going around stabbing people, like just stabbing people, just stabbing spree, just at random snaps, and just goes around and starts stabbing people, and is hurting people and is potentially killing people. It's not murder to kill someone in that situation. And it has been, as has been pointed out about the Vegas shooting, when you have police officers that are going around and doing violent things all day long, and then they take a break for lunch, well, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden they're innocent or they're being peaceful because they're taking a break from all of their other dangerous anti-freedom rights violating violence. To stop this oppression, this is from Jared Miller's Facebook on June 2nd. To stop this oppression, I fear, can only be accomplished with bloodshed. I, however, would rather die fighting for freedom than live on my knees as a slave. Now, first of all, he's certainly wrong that stopping oppression can only be accomplished by bloodshed. In fact, generally speaking, bloodshed or violence in revolutions is counterproductive, and nonviolent revolutions have always historically shown to be more effective and more successful than violent ones. So this is just, if you listen to this guy, like, people they're really not listening, because if they were listening, like, hey, and honestly from an open-minded, open-hearted place, trying to figure out why this happened so it could be prevented, they would actually be thinking, about what he said and what it means, rather than jumping to their predetermined political conclusions. And this is really very telling. I would rather die fighting for freedom than live on my knees as a slave. Now, if you can just grasp that for a second, my life has gotten so bad, I would rather die than go on living this way. This is what Joe is thinking. And if it's, well, on my way out, I'm going to take out some of the people that have kept us down. And because, yes, he understood understood. People understand that cops are the enforcers of the will of politicians. Yes, that's right. Think about it for a second. Everything that politicians do is backed up with the barrel of a gun wielded by a soldier or a police officer. So some people would rather die than live like we are living in America today. When if you want to start a business, you have to ask permission from half a dozen different government agencies. When if you want to earn a living, you have to give half of your income to the government. Yeah, that's right. The average American gives half of their income, half, through all the various fines, fees, taxes, seen, unseen, hidden taxes, to the government. And that's not even getting the inflation tax, where you have to go and be afraid on city streets because the violent gang of thugs in blue costumes might just kill another innocent victim tonight, and you might be that. People don't live like this. You don't want to live in a land of stifled opportunity, of control and oppression. Like this, and if you just listen, you would realize that, yes, this is homegrown terrorism because people have become so despondent. They'd rather die for what they see as a righteous cause than go on living this way. How about thinking in those terms? How about listening and understanding what the bigger problem is? Yeah, it's just like a Palestinian suicide bomber. Life has gotten so miserable for them, they would rather kill themselves. They would rather blow themselves up for the sake of maybe leaving a better world behind. Although I suppose the promise of 72 virgins doesn't hurt either. But that's not what it comes down to for people who are so desperate because their situation is so bad. Now, things are getting bad here in America. I mean, just look at the death of the middle class, the increase in poverty, just the ways that people are suffering. And yes, life is still beautiful, and we are living in a wonderful world of technology and a general preponderance of wealth, but people are still suffering, and people understand why it's happening. People are able to see this. And there's another story referenced here. Heartbreak, slain Vegas officer leaves wife, 3 children. And it's a tragedy. And they have in this video from USA Today, the head of the department or whatever fancy police officer with all of his special regalia, saying that we really need it. This is a great tragedy. These were good officers. Well, there's no such thing as a good cop. And if you're wondering about this, there's a video that I'd like you to reference called Badged Serial Killers and the Death Cult of Politics, an interview we did here with Bill Buford. It's an hour long, but it really, if you don't appreciate the kind of police state we're living in, this will lay everything absolutely bare and explain why politics is a death cult. So why am I supposed to cry for this? Yeah, children go out without a dad, but the fact that it's even being presented that way really kind of misses the point. Now think of this. You are now, according to the government, 8 times more likely to be killed by a cop than by a terrorist. Oh, but we have to protect you from terrorists. Think of how many lives might have been saved by this incident. How many people would these cops have killed had they not been killed? How many lives ruined by the legal system might not be ruined now as a result? We can only hope that some of the officers in America are listening, if you care about your own safety, to understand that you are hurting people. And you can only push them so far before they hit a breaking point. And that's what happened here. And I feel like this is kind of blaming the victim, even to blame the shooters here. Now, I don't mean to say that they're not the aggressors in this incident, but they hit their breaking point. Why? Are they ready to commit suicide for this cause? The couple were part of a growing far-right anti-government movement that has exploded in followers in recent years. Mark Potok, senior fellow at the Southern Poverty Law Center, which tracks hate groups. Oh, really? As he said, these are groups that believe the federal government is involved in a plot to impose martial law, take away people's weapons, and ultimately force the United States into becoming a socialist country. Wait a second. Impose martial law. Now, I actually was a part of imposing martial law in Iraq as a United States Marine in 2004 in Fallujah. What defines martial law is the arbitrary enforcement. You think when everything has been criminalized as it has in America and the average American commits 3 felonies a day and the police are able to arrest whoever they want on suspicion because they smelled pot, you don't think maybe that's getting a little close to martial law if we didn't already blow by it years ago? Take away people's weapons. Well, gee, you think the guy might have been thinking about my case here when my home was raided with more men than Bin Laden's compound because I carried a shotgun in public? Yeah, gee, maybe when you have people on Capitol Hill talking about how they're going to restrict gun ownership, yeah, maybe taking away people's weapons when you see this stuff happening is not an irrational conclusion to come to. Becoming a socialist country. Well, gee, back when it was Hillary Clinton pushing this as first lady, yeah, it was socialized medicine. Now we just call it Obamacare. So, according to an analysis of Jared Miller's Facebook postings by the Senator, the social media page was littered with signs of his allegiance to the Patriot movement. He cited Patriot gun rights activist Adam Kokesh. What? Are you kidding me? Do you think I can sue USA Today now for a libel on this? Patriot gun rights activist Adam Kokesh. Hold on, this is the guy. Not only who just wrote a book on defining freedom as universal nonviolence, but I want to share this from this about what this book is really all about, the paradigm shift. The current global paradigm of social organization is statism. Statism is based on a central authority ruled by force and subservience to the collective or ruling class. It is coming to an end as we wake up to a new freedom paradigm based on human rights, nonviolence, and self-ownership. The transition from the paradigm of statism to the paradigm of freedom is the most important paradigm shift in human history. We are very fortunate to be living at such an exciting time because the statist paradigm results in violence, suffering, exploitation, and the stifling of potential. The freedom paradigm will bring prosperity, happiness, harmony, and a new phase of human existence. And it wasn't enough that I define in this book freedom as universal nonviolence. I actually take on the subject of patriotism. And in case you're wondering, yes, the video patriotism is for bitches, yeah, that was me. I'll put it in slightly more academic terms or concise, clear terms for those of you who might not understand this concept yet. Patriotism is an artificial bordered love designed to create a distinct lack of love for those on the other side of the borders. There's nothing wrong with loving yourself or those similar to you, those who share your values or intrinsic traits you value in yourself, but to assign love based on the borders of a violent racket is an inherently dangerous idea. The most insecure and vulnerable people are most likely to be the most enthusiastic patriots, and thus governments always have an interest in keeping us afraid of outsiders, disconnected from the rest of the world, and stunted in emotional maturity. Insecurity and a tendency to seek identity as part of a group can lead people to do dangerous and irrational things. Patriotism has been used to justify the most horrific crimes in history because people more strongly identified as members of a group than as morally strong individuals. Now, how is this relevant to this story? Not just because I'm being called a patriot. No, but it's funny that the patriot movement is being demonized when the real patriots, the loyalists here, are the cops. Yeah, go government, go Team America. And gee, do you think cops aren't insecure and have a tendency to seek identity as part of a group? Holy crap, have you heard of YouTube? There's some interesting videos out there. Dangerous and irrational things like carry out the policies of the drug war, like putting innocent people in jail for victimless crimes. Patriotism inherently means lowering ourselves to be members of a group like primitive pack animals. Bitches. This leads to the diversion of responsibility essential to government and the unthinking obedience that deludes people into believing that saying, I was just following orders, will excuse immoral behavior. Governments rely on a sense of patriotism in their victims to get them to go along with policies not in their best interest. They need us to believe we are sacrificing for the common good when we are really aiding our victimizers. They need us to go along as part of the herd. They need us to accept the proclaimed selflessness of politicians acting only out of love for the artificial collective. They need to ensure that not too many of us victims are emotionally healthy thinkers who demand self-government and are secure in our identities as free, beautiful, independent people. Patriotism is proof that the patriot isn't free. USA Today goes on. He liked 3% Nation, a patriot group headed by former Alabama militiaman, and his profile picture shows 2 knives and the word patriot with a stars and stripes motif. Geez, where could they have possibly gotten this? From the SPLC's article, alleged Las Vegas cop killers and patriot movement warned of sacrifices. And I want to say, I'm really kind of honored to finally have been pointed out by the SPLC. They put out a Meet the Patriots article on their website in 2010 when I was just getting started as an activist. I was like, wait, all my friends are on this list? How come I'm not on this list? Oh, you know why? It's because back then I was an anti-war activist. Oh, well, if you're anti-war, then we're lefties and we don't know what to do with you. But finally, I've gotten the attention of this anti-hate group, right? So the man identified by authorities today as the murderer of 2 police officers and another person in Sunday's mass shooting in Las Vegas. By the way, if it's 3 people killed, then it's a mass shooting. What, because 2 of them were cops? I'd long ranted against the fascist government, but the last comment he posted before the attack was the most chilling. The dawn of a new day. May all our coming sacrifices be worth it. Miller also posted a photo of himself with Richard Mack, a former Arizona sheriff and leader of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, a radical patriot group whose members were also at the Bundy standoff. The 2 met at a February 8 campaign debate for Libertarian candidates held in Clark County, Nevada, where Bundy's ranch is located. They don't point out here that this dude actually went to the Bundy ranch and was kicked out of the encampment because people thought what he was doing was inappropriate. Yeah. So, again, just the guilt by association here is really ridiculous. But Sheriff Mack made the first Meet the Patriots list of dangerous radicals. But what's funny about this is that Sheriff Mack is really the opposite of a radical. I mean, he makes me look like a radical in a sense, because what he's doing is saying, hey, let's follow the law. Hey, it's the Constitution. Let's obey the Constitution. Let's follow the rules that we all agreed to. Can we do that? And for that, he is called a radical. And the way that he has been smeared, in fact, they had to print a retraction, SPLC, for some of their smears against Sheriff Mack, even though they continued. Miller's Facebook page made several references to recent tangles with the law, apparently over a marijuana conviction. He spoke of talking to a fascist judge about the unfairness of drug laws and also being sent back to jail, apparently after a failed drug screen for 7 weeks beginning in July 2013. So here it is. But the bulk of his page made it clear that he saw himself very much as part of the Patriot or militia movement. His profile picture shows 2 knives and the word Patriot using a stars and stripe motif. And the rest of this is pretty much word for word the part that was ripped in the USA Today story. So, what is SPLC? This is from the Wikipedia page. The SPLC's listing of hate groups has been a source of some controversy. The designation of hate groups has inspired criticism from conservative elected officials and nonprofits. Basically, the SPLC is a liberal fundraising legal harassment organization parading as a civil rights organization. In 2010, it was reported that 22 Republican lawmakers, among them Speaker Boehner and Representative Bachmann, 3 governors, and a number of conservative organizations, took out full-page ads in 2 Washington papers castigating the SPLC for character assassination by listing the Conservative Family Research Council as a hate group. Critics, including journalist Ken Silverstein and political fringe movements researcher Laird Wilcox, have accused the SPLC of an incautious approach to assigning the label, that is, the label of being a hate group. So, why could that possibly have any consequence? I mean, these like, who are these people? Like, who are SPLC? They're the ones going, ooh, you're a hater. You're a hater. You're a hater. Like, that's their job. Of all the things in the world, of all the great injustices, this is what they're calling out. But it's worse than that. In the wake of an August 2012 shooting at the headquarters of the Family Research Council, some columnists criticized the SPLC's listing of the Family Research Council as an anti-gay hate group, while others defended the categorization. So, like, Adam versus Land, we point to cops and soldiers and people in government who are responsible for millions of deaths every single year. And we point this out. And you point to people who are uncomfortable with gays and get innocent people killed as a result. Thanks a lot. The SPLC defended its listing of anti-gay hate groups, stating that groups were selected not because of their stances on political issues such as gay marriage, but rather on here's their excuse. Are you ready for this? Propagation of known falsehoods about LGBT people that have been thoroughly discredited by scientific authorities. So, if you're wrong about science, you must be a hater. Yeah. Well, let me let you know a little secret here, guys. It's about the science of nonviolence and freedom. If you weren't such a left-wing, smear, hate, violence-producing group, SPLC, pretending to be a civil rights organization, maybe you'd see that advocating for government control, advocating for violent control, advocating for society to be organized by the threat of death, because that's what everything government does is backed up with. If you do not comply with the government edicts, if you do not submit to being kidnapped or stolen from, you will be shot. This is commonly known as the rule of law in America. So, there's another thing. Year in Hate and Extremism. Since 2001, the SPLC has released an annual issue of the Intelligence Project called Year in Hate, later renamed Year in Hate and Extremism, in which they present statistics on the numbers of hate groups in America. The current format of the report covers racial hate groups, nativist hate groups, and other right-wing extremist groups such as groups within the Patriot movement. So, what SPLC is basically saying is here, we're not anti-hate. No. Hate is okay. It's okay to be a hater. It's just not okay to be a hater if you disagree with us politically, if you're right wing. See how that works? So why is this so dangerous? Not only because they have a lot of money, which I'll explain in a second. This is from their website. The Southern Poverty Law Center regularly conducts in-person training sessions for local, state, and federal law enforcement officers by request. We focus on the history, background, leaders, and activities of far-right extremists in the United States. These free training sessions last from 2 to 6 hours and are tailored to fit the requesting agency's requirements, from small police departments needing a basic introduction to the hate movement to intelligence groups needing a more detailed, specialized briefing. And if you think this is like not a big deal, no, they actually conduct training, at least according to Sheriff Mack, with every major federal law enforcement agency. Yeah. So the federal government is spending your tax dollars. I don't just mean to subsidize this group, but like, and paying for their training. They are paying for training that is designed to demonize people because of their political persuasion. The guns of government, of the police, are now pointed more at people who have these political beliefs of nonviolence, of patriot, of right-wing, whatever the hell the SPLC doesn't like. They are much more likely to be victimized by government. Pretty sad. So, the SPLC's activities, including litigation, are supported by fundraising efforts, and it does not accept any fees or share in legal judgments awarded to clients it represents in court. Starting in 1974, they set aside money for their endowment because it was convinced that the day would come when nonprofit groups would no longer be able to rely on support through mail because of posting and printing costs. Like the internet wasn't coming? The SPLC has received criticism for perceived disproportionate endowment reserves and misleading fundraising practices. In 1994, the Montgomery Advisor ran a series reporting that the SPLC was financially mismanaged and employed misleading fundraising practices. In response, co-founder Joe Levin stated, "The advertiser's lack of interest in the Center's programs and its obsessive interest in the Center's financial affairs and Mr. D's personal life makes it obvious to me that the advertiser simply wants to smear the Center and Mr. D's." Oh, why don't you look at our propaganda front group thing about being all about civil rights? Don't pay attention to us like stealing money and, taking care of people and, all this other financial shenanigans going on the side. Yeah, don't mind that. The series was a finalist for a 1995 Pulitzer Prize in Explanatory Journalism. In 1996, USA Today called the SPLC the nation's richest civil rights organization with $68 million in assets at the time. The SPLC stated that the endowment stood at $156.2 million in 2008. According to Charity Navigator, their 2009 outlays fell into the following categories: program expenses, 67.5%. That's what they use to smear the rest of us who care about freedom. Administrative expenses of 13.4%. That's what they pay themselves to smear people who care about freedom. And fundraising expenses of 18.9%. I don't know if that's how they feed people or if that's how they get, those who are actually doing fundraising, or if it's another segment of kickbacks, but it really doesn't matter. In October 2013, the SPLC reported its endowment at $281.1 million. All right. Whew. Back to the USA Today story, shall we? Patriot members today constitute one of the most dangerous threats monitored by the Center, he said. Patriot members. I really don't know what to make of their use of this word, because it kind of goes a lot of different directions, but it's funny that now patriot is used as the sort of catch-all smear term, and I don't mind it. It should be, yes. If you're a patriot, you're some kind of bitch, you're some kind of lackey, somebody who has lowered themselves as an individual to be part of a collective, and that's kind of sad. As he said, the only terrorist threat we face is not just jihadists. We have a homegrown terrorist movement that poses a very serious threat. Okay, so now even including domestic terrorism, you're 8 times more likely to be killed by a cop than by a terrorist. So do they monitor cops? Do they monitor soldiers? No. We just monitor people who disagree with us and slander them as hate groups. Yeah. And lump them together with people that actually are hate groups. And to be fair, yes, the SPLC is good at calling out others who may deserve to at times. But you talk about this misplaced angst. Oh, it was talk that couples were not shy about sharing. This is the article talking about them talking to their neighbors and things like that. They could be heard spewing racist and anti-government opinions, another neighbor told the Las Vegas Sun. The duo told people they planned to commit a mass shooting. Brandon Moore, resident of the complex, told the newspaper. They were handing out white power propaganda and were talking about doing the next Columbine, Moore said. And nobody said anything. The couple married in 2012 and lived in Lafayette, Indiana, where Amanda Miller's parents lived. After they were evicted from their apartment, they moved to Las Vegas in January. Jared Miller had a troubled history that included a long record of arrests and convictions for drug offenses going back to 2007. Now, let me rephrase this in like normal language, getting it out of like legally statism. No, Jared Miller has been historically a victim of government for committing things that are entirely within his rights to do, as in consuming whatever substances he wants. He has been victimized repeatedly by government, including being locked in a cage. Again, we're blaming the victim here. On Facebook, he professed support for Cliven Bunny, the cattle rancher cited for grazing his cattle on public land without a permit. He boasted of spending time at his ranch during a recent standoff, but didn't mention that he had been kicked out. In July 2013, he posted teary videos on YouTube to his wife before he was sent back to jail for violating an in-house arrest. As he said, quote, "I wish the world was perfect and we could live happily without all this crap." Imagine that. Now, we know from looking back after the initial reports come out about some of these various shooting tragedies in America that psychotropic medications are pretty much always involved, that all of these people are on some kind of legal drugs. And when someone tries to cover a story like this, doesn't mention that at all, you have to kind of wonder, like, who's paying for them? Whose side are they really on? And this doesn't even come up. But when you are 8 times more likely to be killed by a cop than by a terrorist, I think we need to be looking at the bigger problem here. And every cop swears an allegiance to government, to the Constitution, supposedly, and that's never examined as a theme. Like, hey, gee, why are there so many people dying in America at the hands of cops? Well, geez, maybe because they pledge allegiance to a death cult. So I'm not surprised that they're trying to associate me with patriots and violent, crazy people. And it's funny because they might have been like, maybe the SPLC was actually looking at old pictures of me on the internet when I used to be a patriot, when I used to be a violent psychopath. I know. It's not easy for me to admit this, but I think I'd like to be able to share the story, and I do as much as I can so that people can learn from it and get better. I was a violent psychopath, and then I quit my government job as a United States Marine, as a paid killer for politicians. I'm so much better now. But working for government can really bring out the worst in people. I tortured people in Fallujah. I tortured Iraqis, and I have to come back and live with the reality of that. And what I've come to learn is that pledging allegiance to a death cult is generally a bad idea and leads to people doing bad things. So it shouldn't be any surprise to anyone that somebody finally snapped. And they're not the first, and they're not going to be the last. But I want to say that I have always preached universal nonviolence. I have demonstrated in my interactions with government an absolute commitment to the strategies of nonviolence, to the principles of nonviolence, to the point where even at the Jefferson dance party, where I was being picked up and body slammed on a marble floor, when I've been arrested over 36 times. I've been beaten up by cops. I've been harassed. I've got nerve damage in my shoulder from being picked up by their arms from behind. And I've not once lifted a finger against a cop. I've even been accused of assaulting a police officer, federal charges that had me in jail for a week before standing up against that, got those charges dropped. And they want to say that I'm the guy who has some responsibility for this, that they need to associate me with the Millers. And there is an association. There's certainly something to be learned from this connection. I just hope that people are actually going to listen to this message and see that there is a much bigger problem, that violence begets violence, turning to the institution of government to deal with these problems, that an institution that is based on violence is guaranteed to make the problem worse. So I would just hope, again, and it's so tiresome now, one shooting after another. Oh, is there anything unique this time? Well, yeah, there kind of is. And it's not just that I'm being accused here. It's not just that I'm being associated with these. I'm happy to call the Millers. I think violent psychopaths is not. Maybe I'm presuming in my diagnosis, but no. What they did was crazy and stupid and counterproductive to freedom. Not necessarily unjustified violence. When you understand what the police state is, when you understand what government is. But if you really want to be a champion for freedom, you have to respect the freedoms of others, much as you practically can. And I understand, if you lose your shit, yeah, it happens to the best of us. If you lose your shit because the man's got you down, please, don't give up on life. People will do that. It's going to happen more in America. Things are going to get a little bit worse, at least, before they get better. But we're going to need you on the other side. If you feel like the Millers do, I just hope that you would channel whatever rage you have to something that's worth living for. And, Jared, while you said that this was the cause worth dying for, that this is, you'd rather live on your knee, you'd rather die fighting for freedom than live on your knees as a slave, you know, I can appreciate that. And maybe that's where the real connection is between the Millers and I. But I sympathize. I sympathize with anybody else in this situation who is feeling so downtrodden, who is feeling so desperate, that you would rather die fighting for freedom than live on your knees as a slave. But I'm sorry, Mr. Miller, you snapped, you lost your shit. You did something really dumb and now you're dead. And it would have been a lot better to have you here with us, to maybe fix some of your bad ideas, to really bring you over to the message of freedom. And maybe then, as a nonviolent warrior, you could join me in standing up, using nonviolence to achieve the stateless, voluntary, peaceful, harmonious society that at least I'm working towards.
Nobody else is showing the IDs. Yeah, you got to show IDs.
Okay, one thing that I want to address real quick is the Southern Poverty Law Center and him talking about the training, the law enforcement. And I think most of us have seen this, and this happened like, I want to say 8 years ago or so, but the video was leaked, and it was FEMA says founding fathers are terrorists. I'm going to play this real quick, and then I also want to get into something else.
You can't work, because think about the Christians, okay? You accept Jesus Christ, you don't want to say you don't. What did they do? They took their head off. They hated you if you didn't accept Jesus Christ, you don't want to say it. See, this is reality. They're the terrorists, but the bottom line is to them, they are not. Now, why is that important to understand? Because they are committed to their cause and to their way of life, and you are yours. And they see you as being wrong. That's very different. When people are passionate about what they believe in, they become very difficult enemy to deal with. Who was the first terrorist organization in the United States? Tommy Brown. You mean Thomas Jefferson? You mean Theo Washington? Paul Revere? These guys right here, we have to tell them. Did they try to kill people? They tried to intimidate the British. Did they use active violence? Your founding fathers, my founding fathers, were involved in acts of terrorism against British officials because they systematically had British officials assassinated. The guys that we call our founding fathers, George Washington, Mr. Arnold, who cut down Cherry Street, admitted is the same guy who signed death orders, if you will, on members of the British government, the British Crown, who they wanted to eliminate because politically they had influence in certain pockets of the United States at that time, the 13th colony, and they wanted to divide and conquer. They made it a whole lot of civilians. Hey, listen, I'm going to be honest with you, okay? If they killed 10,000 civilians tomorrow with a biological agent, that's too bad for them.
This was a 3-day thing that happened in 2001. I'm not quite sure when the video was leaked, but the video was taken in 2001, and that was FEMA training. And I do want to urge people to check out Adam Kokesh's book Freedom, it does get down to fundamentals of what a free society would be made up of and ways it can operate. And a lot of it's stuff that's been talked about, but I do think he definitely put it in a format that's easy for anybody to understand what he's saying. And so, go check that out. He's got it for free on his website, adamversustheman.com/freedom. Check it out for free. And I definitely think it was a well-written book. But one thing I want to address is something he said in there. And it was about, having, can feel the pain of Jared Miller. And, but, pointing out, no, you snapped, dude. You lost hope. We definitely aren't anywhere close to something like that. And, it's something that I have kind of been pondering lately. And it's the fact that I think we are going to see things like this happen more and more, because the natural nature of a living being is to be free. And the more restrictive society gets on people, the more they're going to be depressed and be wanting to break those shackles. And when someone doesn't really have a grasp on what liberty and freedom is, and the concept of the non-aggression principle, and, understanding, how to have a nonviolent society, if they don't have that fundamental grasp, this is what we're going to see. And it's people just losing hope, losing any confidence, and snapping. That's not something that's unheard of. Definitely when government gets you down. Does that justify it? No. But that's understanding where this is coming from. And, I'm always, apprehensive when it comes to these mass shootings and all this. It's just so filled with propaganda on both sides that, I really don't take, is this a false flag or is this real? I don't know. But the matter of the fact is, if it is real, why? Our schools have become basically prisons. Would it be far-fetched to think that these kids that they're getting bored in class, they're being dumbed down or attempted to be dumbed down, and a young mind naturally wants to explore. A natural human being at a young age wants to explore, wants to learn. And allowing them to be able to do that can be stifled in public schools and even private schools. Is it far-fetched that the kid that might be a faster learner and easily gets distracted because he's bored and then gets punished on top of it might eventually snap if he keeps getting punished? Because he's getting punished for being bored? That goes against common sense. That goes against natural instinct. And we have to address those issues. And, again, that's a good reason to homeschool. I've really become an advocate for homeschooling. I think it's extremely important that we break the system that's really breaking society. They don't want to teach your kids half of the stuff they used to. Don't want to have the art classes. Don't want to have, all these other classes, but they can teach them bestiality and sex ed. We have to fix society by putting our money, our possessions, and our soul behind it all. You have to walk the walk, and it starts by going. Public schools are junk. I'm not putting my kid in them. And when parents start just ripping all their kids out of these public schools, what you're going to see is a pushback from the government. Well, when that happens to more people because they're trying to give their children a good education, they want their children to actually be smart, and they're learning what kind of fraud the public school systems are. It helps to expose the fraud that it is. And it also will help to expose some of the other frauds because, now all the kids are being homeschooled. We can't check, make sure they're getting vaccinated and all this. So you're going to see more of them come down on the vaccinations and want to come into your home, and you're going to see all the invasions of privacy, all those laws that they push and go, well, we'll never use it for this. Oh, yeah, they will. When you no longer follow that religious cult of government, what they tell you is good for you. Give me a second here as this loads. We do have one here. This was breaking earlier today, but for Tea Party, people that you definitely probably could call patriots, they're libertarian-leaning constitutionalists. They're not there yet, but Tea Party wins massive victory, defeats House Majority Leader Eric Cantor in GOP primary. This comes from benswan.com. With 99% of precincts reporting the Tea Party just proved it's not dead. Tea Party-backed David Bratt leads House Majority Leader Eric Cantor 56% to 44%. The race has been called for Bratt. Behind Speaker John Boehner, Cantor was the Republican Party's second most powerful lawmaker. So, will we see change? I think that's to be seen. I don't know where that's going to go. But I know there's a lot of people that consider themselves libertarian that are definitely looking at that. So, and FDA, another one out of benswan.com, strikes again. This one's titled FDA to artisan cheesemakers, cut it out. Okay. According to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the only acceptable cheese is not made by one of the many artisan cheesemakers from places like Wisconsin, New York, and Vermont. Under a new interpretation of an old law, the FDA told artisan cheesemakers that their cheese cannot be cured on wood planks, though the process has been done for thousands of years. According to Madison, Wisconsin-based blog Cheese Underground, the FDA inspected several New York State cheesemakers and cited them for using wood surfaces to age their cheese. The New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets Division of Milk Control and Dairy Services, which, like most of every state in the U.S., including Wisconsin, has allowed this practice, reached out to FDA to clarify on the issue. A response was provided by Monica Metz, branch chief of FDA's Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, Dairy and Egg Branch. In the response, Metz stated the use of wood for cheese ripening or aging is considered an unsanitary practice by FDA and a violation of FDA's current food manufacturing practice regulations. Here's an excerpt. Microbial pathogens can be controlled if food facilities engage in good manufacturing practice. Proper cleaning and sanitation of equipment and facilities are absolutely necessary to ensure that pathogens do not find niches to reside and proliferate. Adequate cleaning and sanitation procedures are particularly important in facilities where persistent strains of pathogenic microorganisms like Listeria, monocytogenes could be found. The use of wood shells, rough or otherwise, for cheese ripening does not conform to CGMP requirements, which require that all plant equipment and utensils shall be so designed and so of such material and workmanship that to be adequately cleanable and shall be properly maintained. This new scrutiny is due to the Food Safety Modernization Act, which is the most sweeping reform of American food safety laws in generations. That was signed into law by President Obama on January 4, 2011. This change could be devastating for artisan cheesemakers and their award-winning cheeses. American Cheese Society Triple Best in show winner Pleasant Ridge Reserve from Upland's Cheese in Wisconsin is cured on wood boards. Likewise, for award winners Cabot Clothbound in Vermont, current U.S. champion cheese, Maracay, Beyond Greek, and 2013 Best in Show runner-up Blue Mott Bandage Cheddar. It's just the latest in a pattern under the Food Safety Modernization Act. Walter Olson, senior fellow at the Cato Institute Center for Constitutional Studies, told the Daily Caller when Congress passed the Food Safety Modernization Act 3.5 years ago, libertarians and others warned again and again that the law would put traditional, local, and artisan food and farm methods at risk and instead promote mass industrial food. He said the consumer groups and many progressives dismissed those concerns as alarmist. And again, we see, laws. Oh, it won't be used for that. Sure enough, it will be. And it will continue to be. We have to figure out a way to get past that. I think it's, a lot of these co-ops that you can buy shares in. A lot of those will probably, excuse me there. Those will probably be still ran. I think they're probably less checked. And just farming yourself, if you have property, the best way to get the best food is raising it yourself, growing it yourself. That's really going to be the most important step. And, I think more kids should also be raised to, learn how to do these things. Even if you're not a big person into farming, at least be able to have somewhat of a green thumb, know how to start a plant, grow it, harvest it. Look at Eustace Conway's place out there, you could send your kids out there and they can learn how to do some stuff. If you're not big into it, you could go out there and learn how to do some stuff. You know, it's one of those things that we really have to start taking all this into our own hands. Since we're in the area of the youth, Stefan Molyneux put one out, study children assaulted 936 times per year. And I wanted to kind of go ahead and play this one. And he's got Dr. George Holden. He's a professor of psychology at SMU. So, you know, I'm going to go ahead and play this, and we'll talk about it after.
Hi, everybody. Stefan Molyneux from Free Domain Radio. I'm extremely pleased to have Dr. George Holden with us. He is a parenting expert, a professor of psychology at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas, author of the book Parenting, A Dynamic Perspective, and a study which I recently referenced on this show, Eavesdropping on the Family, a pilot investigation of corporal punishment in the home. Thank you, Dr. Holden, so much for taking the time today.
Sure, my pleasure.
So this was, if I understand it correctly, a bit of a surprise for you, this study. You were originally trying to study something else, and then it kind of changed course, right?
Right. We wanted to study actually what really goes on in the home, but we had a focus, and our focus was on parental yelling, because almost all parents report that they yell at their kids, but there's been very little attention given to the quality of the yelling. So we wanted to get a glimpse into that by having moms record their home interactions with a little digital audio arm recorder that we had given to moms. And in the course of that, listening to those recordings, we came across these spanking and slapping incidents. So we decided to focus on those.
And a surprising amount, if I understand this correctly, because I think the parents report that they hit 18 times a year. I think your calculation was a little different.
Well, yeah, the 18 times a year was based on a different study, but that was, the 18 times a year is sort of a general reference that a lot of people assume is accurate. And what we were finding was that those, at least for the parents who are spanking and slapping, that estimate is probably way, way off, that parents are doing it a lot more than had previously been thought.
Right. To the point of 18 times a week or 900 and change a year,
It could be,
which is really an astounding figure when you think, I mean, at any level to be hit 900 times a year by somebody 5 times your size is quite a formative set of experiences, I would assume.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's not everyone. That's only that's the high-end spankers or slappers who may be doing it that much or perhaps even more. But it is, I think, a significant experience that these children are having, and I would call it a micro trauma that they're actually experiencing and repeatedly experiencing. And it's likely that these micro traumas can have long-term effects on brain development and certainly on their behavior and their orientations toward others.
Okay, so let's talk for a moment about the theory versus the practice of corporal punishment, because there was a significant deviation, or set of deviations from the theory versus the practice. I wonder if you could outline some of the theories behind corporal punishment and then ways in which these moms were not pursuing that theory.
Well, there isn't any one single theory about how to go about using corporal punishment. Rather, to my knowledge, there's about 5 or 6 authors out there who have published in this domain recommending how one should spank. And so what we did is we looked through those 5 or 6 different authors and kind of came up with what seemed to be fairly consistent across the authors' recommendations about how to spank. Now, we actually didn't ask the parents whether they were aware of the guidelines or how to go about doing it. Instead, we just analyzed our data along the lines of those recommendations or those guidelines. And they were things like, do it infrequently, do it as a last resort, do it for a severe misbehavior, not a minor misbehavior, do it when you're calm, hit just once or twice. And they suggested that if you do it, it's going to be effective. And so they encourage parents to do it. So that's what we were looking at. We evaluated those sort of 5 recommendations and then the effectiveness of it with our data set, which is, admittedly, it's a small data set. We recruited 35 moms, and out of, we had some technical difficulties with 2, so we had 33 moms, and we heard spanking in 14 of those 14 of the families out of the 33. So it's not a large sample, but I think it really reveals what is going on in a lot of homes. And we can't argue that it's representative of all homes, but I think it gives us a little snapshot about what's going on. And what we've found is parents aren't spanking at all along the guidelines what's been recommended. They're spanking frequently, they're spanking for trivial misbehaviors, they're spanking 30 seconds after the misbehavior occurred, not as a last resort, but rather as a second resort. Typically, moms, and we had a couple of dads say, stop it, cut it out. And then when the kid didn't do it, they ended up slapping or spanking the kid. So it occurred very early in the disciplinary interaction. About half the time, parents were clearly heated, angry with the child, as you might expect. And the one clear guideline they followed is, as far as we could tell, they did only spank, in most cases, once or twice, though there were a couple of exceptions. In one case, one mom hit the child 11 times in a row. So...
that was the one for fighting with his sister, right?
I think so, yes, right.
Nothing like using aggression to teach children how bad aggression is. How people can process that cognitive dissonance in the moment is amazing.
Well, my take is that parents aren't doing enough processing of their behavior. And if they did what I call meta-parenting, which is reflecting on your parenting behavior, and observed how the child's reacting, thought about, yes, the spanking does work for the immediate, but if I wait a few minutes, my kid's misbehaving again. So clearly it's not working. If they thought about these things, I think they'd think, I need to try something else. This is not working. But most parents don't do that. They just hit, and the incident is over, so they think, must have worked. So our other finding was that in most cases, children were misbehaving within 10 minutes after the spanking. Some were doing the same behavior, some were doing other behaviors, but clearly it was not an effective tool for promoting positive behavior from a child.
Right. Now, the statistics that I've heard, and they're kind of all over the map, but they're certainly at the high end of the percentages. 70, 80, 85% of American parents say that they still spank their children. You had a little less than 50%. Do you think that parents may have modified their behavior because they were being recorded? I know some of them were hitting that very night that they put the recorder on, so probably not. Do you have any reason to, or do you have any knowledge about why it might have been lower than the average?
Well, the reason probably was because we just had a small sample of behavior. That if we had a larger sample, like we had 4 to 6 nights of recordings, if we had 2 weeks of recordings or 3 weeks, it's likely that we would have more incidents across different families. So I think that's really the issue in this particular case. I have no doubt that spanking does occur in at least 70% to 90% of samples in the United States. It's just, particularly in the South, it's just accepted as a standard disciplinary technique, and not enough parents question it.
Well, I guess it can be frustrating. It must be even more. You've been studying this for 30 years, and I've been for, I guess 6 or 7 years, a minor public figure attempting to get experts like yourself in front of parents to help them to sort of understand that it doesn't work, that it can have a negative effect on IQ points, that it can provoke oppositional defiant disorders, that it degrades the quality of social interactions, both peer and to authority, and you name it. I mean, there's almost nothing other than eyes exploding that spanking can promote in terms of negative behavior. I've had Dr. Elizabeth Gershoff, I've had Alison Gopnik on to try and talk about this stuff. It really seems like this is a hard message to get across to parents. And again, you've been working at it a lot longer than I have been. If I sort of look at the revolution in domestic violence that occurred from the late 1950s to the 1960s, it was relatively quick, which doesn't mean, of course, that it was eliminated. It just means that the message got out very quickly. But with this, I mean, I remember reading books when I was younger, the Sensible Spock's book in the post-war period, book, A Sensible Baby in Child Care or something like that, where he was against spanking, and the correlation between spanking and negative outcomes for children and its lack of efficacy in even promoting what the parents say they want, which is compliance and obedience and better behavior. This stuff has been known for decades. It seems really hard to get this message across to parents. Why do you think that is?
Lots of reasons, I think, are going on. I think in the U.S., part of the issue is, given it's been historically such a prominent disciplinary technique in most families, that parents accept it without questioning because they don't want to they don't want to suspect that their parents were not doing the best job that they could have done, and then given that they've been using it, they also don't want to question their own parenting and think that perhaps they have been engaged in a practice that isn't really beneficial for their child. So there's some of that issue going on. I think there's another issue is in the United States, we don't really have in our collective dialogue the idea of children's rights. And in many countries where children's rights are more prominent, they will address the issue of children's right not to be hit. But in the United States, we don't talk about children's rights, only the rights of the unborn or adults' rights or parents' rights. So there's sort of I think a blockage there that also kind of inhibits more dialogue and more discussion about what is best for children, because we're just thinking about what's best for parents in terms of parents having the right to raise their children whatever way they want. So there's some of that issue. There's also some problem of lack of, even though this may be surprising to you, there still is a communication gap that we still hear parents have not been informed that corporal punishment is associated with negative effects. And we need to do a better job getting the message out that there is this massive research and literature showing these associations and showing that spanking is not effective. But parents, some certainly have, but many still have not heard that message. So that's part of what I'm involved in. I'm associated with this group called the U.S. Alliance to End the Hitting of Children. And part of our job, as we see it, is to educate the country that there are this corporal punishment is associated with these negative problems, and there's better ways to rear our children.
So for the parents, and we still haven't really talked about the yelling, which is also pretty significant. And I know that in the study you asked for parents who admitted to yelling at their children, and you didn't find many who weren't on that side. We haven't even really talked about that, but I would like to see, just calm, peaceful negotiation with children. I'm a stay-at-home dad, and I found that to be just a fantastic way of interacting with kids, because they're also powerless. And to me, where you have the most powerless members of society, you need to approach them the most gently and the most solicitously, rather than exercising power over the powerlessness, which among adults we recognize is not great. We're still working on that with kids. So for parents who want to not be aggressive, and I know you've got a whole book about this, but I wonder if you could sum up some of the options that are available for parents who want to be more reasonable with their children and not provoke these kinds of problems.
Yeah, sure. Part of the problem is parents fail to recognize that one of the problems that children have is their immature brains, and that they yet don't have their prefrontal cortex has not yet developed so that they can control their behavior to act like an adult. But parents often forget this and kind of are expecting immediate compliance and expecting children to remember what the parent had just told them a few minutes ago, when they don't really have the cognitive ability or the neurological capacity to do some of this. So part of the message is for parents to recognize that their children are these developing organisms, and that their brains are immature and they need many more years to develop so that they will be adult-like. In the process of waiting for those brains to develop, you don't want to do things that could potentially damage your kid or result in negative, unintended negative consequences, which spanking can. So you need to avoid situations that put you in that conflict, if you can. So that sort of one recommendation is to structure the environment, structure the situation, so that you're not in a situation that may result in the child misbehaving or doing something where you have to try to discipline them, because they don't have the wherewithal at this point to be able to resist temptations like candy or cookies or something, or potentially dangerous things. So you need to structure the situation. If you can't do that, then you also need to keep in mind, do you have appropriate expectations for the child? And these obviously need to change with the child's age. But are you expecting appropriate behavior for the particular age of the child? So with a young, and depending on that, the types of responses you can use vary as a function of the child's age and the circumstances. For example, with a young toddler or infant or toddler, you can divert their attention very easily from the tempting object to a positive interaction. As the child gets older, then diversion often won't work. So you have to begin to do things like focus on what motivates the child, what do they care about, and then remove what they care about. In most cases, what they most care about is adult attention, parent attention and love and warmth. And if you express to the child why his or her behavior is not acceptable and what your problem is, and that you will have to stop engaging with the child for the moment because the child's behavior is not acceptable, so basically putting the child in a short timeout, then I think that's very effective for preschoolers. As you get older, that doesn't work. Then you have to, again, focus on what motivates the child, whether it's watching TV or using a computer or electronic or peer interaction, and then control those things by parents giving firm guidance and setting boundaries, setting limits, and disciplining the child, but in a positive, constructive way, not in a a punitive or negative way. So,
I've certainly found also that the most powerful parenting tool that I have available to me is the mirror. Because if I say to my daughter, I don't think you're paying attention, and I've been on my cell phone half the morning, which is rare, but whatever, right? Then am I modeling the behavior that I'm criticizing? And so, of course, in your study, the parents who are saying to their children, you're being inappropriately aggressive while launching physical attacks on them within 30 seconds of the conflict beginning, it's like look in the mirror time rather than look at your kid. And you're right about of course, the brain development. I don't ask my daughter to get something from the top shelf because she's 5. Physically, she hasn't grown high enough to get there, and it's the same thing with the brain itself. So if you look into your mirror and figure out what are you modeling for the kid, is anything coming back that you're modeling, in which case you need to alter your own behavior and not focus on the kid, and recognize that they're still short mentally and can't get to the top shelf.
Absolutely, yeah. We all need to reflect more on our own behavior, look in the mirror, as you say. We expect our children to be calm, controlled individuals, but then we get so worked up about their behavior, and we start yelling at them. And we model, as you point out, the very behaviors we don't want to see them develop. So parents really need to take a time out themselves, take a step back, and look at their behavior and think about why was I getting so worked up about this issue? Is it really that important? Do I really need to have a battle over this little thing? Because the long-term goals are what are important. And long-term goals are raising children to be happy, healthy, independent, respectful individuals, plus whatever other things you want. But if we think about those long-term goals and then look at what we're getting so worked up about in the immediate context, I think parents will often say, I should let go of that. That's really not that important. And I need to focus on developing a good, warm relationship with my child, not a relationship where the child fears me because I may hit him or her if she doesn't do exactly what I say, exactly when I say it. So I think we in general have developed this a little misguided orientation to what a good parent is, and that we need to reorient our focus and focus on what is now called positive parenting. And positive parenting is the idea that you engage in good cooperative relationships with your child. If you try to calmly elicit good behavior, the child really wants to do what pleases you. And that will, the child then will, if you do it in a loving way, the child will often behave in the way that you want, and this will promote a good relationship, open communication, and the child who's going to be loving and respectful in the long term.
And we fully accept that love and aggression are incompatible in adult relationships. Like, you can't hit your wife until she really respects and loves you. But we have this short circuit when it comes from adult to child. You're not going to be motivated at work by somebody yelling at you. You're going to kind of deflate and, be upset. And so, I guess, except for the army, I guess, but in sort of a civilian life, we have this kind of weird disconnect. And that which we fully understand would never work in an adult relationship, hitting, yelling, aggression, and so on. We just have this complete opposite standard when it comes to kids, and breaking that down and helping people to understand that children have the least voluntary relationships in society. I've used this analogy before, that if the government assigned you a wife and she wasn't there by choice, you would have to treat her extra special in order to overcome the involuntary nature of her relationship to you. And it's the same with kids. They don't choose you as parents, they're born into it. And I think we have to treat them the very best to really overcome that involuntary nature of their relationship. Like, I try to parent like, if my daughter could choose any father in the world, she would choose me. Now, she doesn't have that choice, but I kind of want to parent as if she had that choice. Because, she can choose to associate with me or not when she grows up. And I think it's almost like power corrupts, and the fact that children aren't there by choice and can't leave, which I think should make people have the highest standards in those relationships, I think actually causes those standards in many cases to degrade.
Right. Yeah, and let's not forget, 150 years ago, men could hit their wives for misbehaving. And it was accepted and very common in the United States that men would do this. And they had to, of course, operate under the rule of the thumb, which meant they couldn't beat their wives with a stick larger than the diameter of their thumb. But nevertheless, it was incredibly common. And we don't yet, as you point out, we don't yet make the connection that we are still beating our children. Sometimes with objects, sometimes sticks, but often just with the hand, which should be a low object. But we still beat them with the hand. Even if it's a slapping, it's still an assault on the child that should not be practiced.
Right. I accepted that rule of thumb thing. You may want to Google that. I think it may, in fact, be an urban myth. But nonetheless, it was more accepted to have marital violence in the past than it is now, and we hope to extend that onwards. So what's next for these, for me at least, eye-popping and incredibly valuable studies? Are you going to work more with this kind of approach with recordings? Are you going to do more with the data set that you have now? What's up next for you?
Both. We have hundreds of hours of recordings, which take double or triple that long to try to code and then write up for studies. So we have several years more of working with this data set. But in the meantime, I also want to expand the study, get a more representative sample, to get more samples of corporal punishment, to try to replicate what we found and expand it, try it out in different socioeconomic groups, and see to what extent we can generalize what we found. We'll be trying some new methodology to see if we can speed up the process and make it automatic a bit more. So we're going to be using some equipment that will automatically transcribe the words heard on the recordings, which won't necessarily spot the corporal punishment incidents, but then we can at least zoom into the conflictual incidents and then listen for the spanking or slapping that often occurs around those. So those are our plans right now, to continue on with the data set, but also expand with a new data set and larger sample.
Well, fantastic. And we'll, of course, put links to your book and to your websites on the link to the show. I really appreciate it. I mean, having this kind of data, we can make a moral case, but having this kind of data is enormously helpful for activists like me to be able to go out and help people to understand how things can be done better. So I hugely appreciate the work that you're doing, and really look forward to the next data set that you release.
Great. My pleasure. Thank you. Yes, it is a unique.
Thanks very much.
So, okay. Take care.
Take care.
And that was Stefan Molyneux. And, when I first listened to this, I'm thinking, a lot of this is making absolute sense. And, but one thing that came out of it that I really was looking at is how much it transfers into how society is now. Definitely when it comes to the acceptance of government. And a lot of the acceptance that some have for the abuse of this authority and their justification for, the police brutality and a lot of these other issues. And this is something I think that does relate to the youth and spanking and corporal punishment. I think a lot of it is related to that because you learn most of everything when you're young. And at times you got to think, are we not just, by doing corporal punishment with children, or are we not just going, it is okay for authority figures to beat you down to get you to submit? And I personally know that, there are better ways of going about it. And, we just need to really start looking in the mirror. And then, how Gandhi say, be the change you want to see. This world right now is headed just down a path that we've been down way too many times. It's not slowing down. Give me a second while this page loads here. This one, I seen it in the Blaze, anyway, across my news feed, and there's actually a few of them. I'm going to read this one, and this has to do with the youth, but also has to do with the concept: do you own yourself? And even parental rights. But this one out of the Blaze is titled "Girl Drug Tested by Middle School 5 times in 3 years. Parents said enough is enough, and straight A student pays the price." Leah May was drug tested once as a 5th grader, once again as a 6th grader, then 3 times during her 7th grade year. It wasn't because the straight A student was suspected of anything, just that her number came up more than a few times as part of Susquehanna Middle School's random drug testing it administers to all students as early as grade 5 who participate in extracurricular activities and who want parking permits, according to Penn Live. Well, this past year, her 8th grade year, and last at the Duncannon, Pennsylvania school, just north of Harrisburg, Leah's parents had enough. They wouldn't sign a permission slip allowing yet another embarrassing urine test on their daughter, while her previous test came back negative. But that decision came with a big price, so that couldn't be part of the National Junior Honor Society. We were so tired of this happening over and over again, so we said that we do to make it stop. Melinda May told Penn Live, "It's sad that this is what we had to resort to. It's ridiculous." Michael May added that he and his wife went to the principal, school board, superintendent. They're all lame on this issue. We even contacted the ACLU. They said it was concerning but sadly legal. As you might image, the Mays aren't the only family fed up with the Susquehanna District's policy targeting students so young. Christian Castle's daughter, Natalie, who just completed the 5th grade at the middle school, was tested 3 times last school year. Natalie, 10, endured the test due to her involvement in the Family and Consumer Science Club. I don't think it's necessary for 5th and 6th grades, Castle told Penn Live. I told the superintendent, if you see signs, red glassy eyes, a stupor, then I could see testing. It's too much. My daughter is 10 years old. Castle said she recently spoke with Superintendent Kent Smith about the issue, but said he wasn't considering changing the policy, noting that he believes it's a deterrent to drug use and that his own children are subject to the same random drug testing. I'll give you a second here as I reload this real quick. Said, I told Smith to tell me that Nally wouldn't be tested again. Castle told Penn Live. He said, no, I cannot guarantee that. That's why I'm making an issue of it. A computer algorithm randomly chooses students for drug testing, Smith said, according to Penn Live, adding that a student could be tested as many as 4 times in a school year. And I'm going to play this clip real quick. No, if it plays. And, you know, you also have to look at it. You know, they're testing these little girls. And anybody that knows how drug testing is done, you know, they have to watch you if it's a proper drug test. And when I was in school and they did drug testing, mostly in high school, sports and stuff, yeah, they didn't just let you go into a stall, you know, you gotta keep the door open and all that. So they're probably doing that here too. It wouldn't surprise me.
They start the random drug testing policy in 5th grade for middle schoolers as well as the high schoolers. My daughter's been tested now 3 times, which is a cost of $45 to the taxpayers of Susquehanna School District. I've asked the superintendent, Mr. Smith, if he would change the policy to not include kids in grade 5 and 6, which are age 10 and 11. And I'm going to be taking my question to the school board because Mr. Smith was not interested in changing the policy. After Natalie was tested 2 times, we talked about it. What bothers her about the drug testing is...
To me, it's an invasion on my privacy, and they make me sign a paper before they tell me whether I tested positive or negative, and then they don't give my parents anything to take home that says what I tested.
She's made Distinguished Honor Roll every marking period. She's been chosen as Student of the Month, and we're almost starting to feel like here's a great kid, here's a kid that wants to get involved in all these extracurricular activities, and she's being punished for it. They say it's a deterrent, but it seems almost like more like a deterrent from joining extracurricular activities rather than a deterrent to using drugs. I've asked the district if they would consider simply testing the students they're suspicious of. I'm aware that certainly there is illicit drug use even in young ages, but they said no, this is going to be in addition to anyone they suspect. They're going to continue with the random drug testing. So in 5th grade, she was randomly drug tested using a urine test 3 times. To me, that's not acceptable.
I love this game.
And really, it's not acceptable. They are invading private. It's conditioning. This is conditioning. This is what you get with the public school systems. This is what they're training them. Look at your TSA. You look at all of this, and then back to something from the beginning of the broadcast. People snapping. They lose hope. If you want to try to be a good person, well, you still get punished. Actually, the better of a person that you try to be, I try to follow the laws. I try to do everything right. The more you're punished, because the more you're restricted of being a free individual. And you wonder why people snap, because that's not the nature. we started out as hunter-gatherers roaming around. It goes against nature, and it goes against common sense. If you look at, how have some of the best things in history come about, and it's because free individuals that had the ability to think, and a lot of times even when they were in an authoritarian government, in private and in secret and in back rooms, they did their creations. It was against authority that, they were able to experiment and come up with new technology and new ideas. And, some of the greatest thinkers in history were arrested. And it's one of those things that it's the free individual that creates. And it's the collective that creates on top of that. By the use by multiple people, you find out what works and what doesn't. And then another individual goes, well, I got an idea how we can do that better. And it's that expansion on thought. Instead of having this collectivist thinking that we're all supposed to think exactly the same. And, we have to be that free society to be able to prosper. You can't do it without. Now I got a short clip here. I want to go ahead. And this is Obama claiming gun violence on rise. And this is our Next News Network. So I'm going to go ahead and just play this right now and get it over with here. Or I can get off my browser.
Yesterday, in a live broadcast discussion on student loan debt, President Obama claimed that
our levels of gun violence are off the charts. There's no advanced developed country on earth that would put up with this.
Obama went on to say that Americans should be ashamed and complained about not being able to pass gun control legislation. Obama's statements contradict many studies that show a 49% drop in gun homicide since 1993. The Bureau of Justice Statistics found that non-fatal gun crimes dropped almost 70% over the same time period. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reached similar conclusions in their study on gun violence. That study also pointed out the benefits of concealed firearm carry for protection. To some, it seems the Obama administration has a gun control agenda that ignores the facts. A Florida man was sentenced to life in prison for firing his gun in self-defense without injuring anyone. Ronald Williams fired 5 shots as a means of scaring off 4 men that he felt threatened by. This event took place 6 years ago, and he was convicted of 4 counts of aggravated assault with a firearm, which holds a mandatory sentence of 20 years for each count. Williams is not the only Florida resident serving time for such an act. Marissa Alexander is already serving 60 years for a warning shot that was fired over the head of a man that had abused her. Reporter William Norman Grigg surmises that these cases illustrate how the U.S. wound up with the largest prison population in history.
Boca Raton's Mayor Susan Haney has declared June 20th as Take Your Dog to Work Day. For the first time, Boca will participate in the annual event that began 16 years ago and is sponsored by Pet Sitters International. Mayor Haney made the announcement earlier this week to raise awareness about potential pets at the Tri-County Animal Rescue and the 50,000 lives the rescue has saved since opening in 1996. The mayor said that she is looking forward to seeing pets in everyone's workplace, but the assistant city manager indicated that dogs will still not be allowed in City Hall. A boa constrictor was seen in Boca Raton. On Saturday, the Golden Harbor Homeowners Association reported to the State Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission and police that the snake was hanging around the Lake Wyman area. The Boca police captain said that they would watch the boa until wildlife officials can arrive to take care of it. Anyone who spots the snake can call the Boca Police non-emergency line at 561-368-6201.
Boynton Beach Police issued a public warning of an IRS phone scam that caused at least one 68-year-old woman to lose about $5,000. The scam is described as sophisticated. The scammed woman said she was told it was the IRS and that she owed over $5,000 and that she would go to jail and her house would be taken if she didn't pay right away. She was instructed to get cash, purchase 10 money pack cards for $500 each, and give the fake agent the account numbers. Residents should be aware that the IRS will never ask for credit card numbers or request wire transfers over the phone or via email. If you think you are being contacted by a scammer, you can report it to the Treasury Inspector General or the Federal Trade Commission. According to the Sun Sentinel, the Political Action Committee, or PAC, Next Gen Climate, is trying to raise $100 million and put the funds towards 7 races in the country, including Florida's gubernatorial race between Governor Rick Scott and Charlie Crist. The Next Gen Climate PAC says that Scott is a climate denier and that Crist is committed to acting on climate change. The PAC plans to target Hispanic voters in South Florida in an attempt to push Democratic voter turnout in the Tampa Bay area.
Palm Beach County commissioners were considering a revenue-generating plan regarding a new incinerator for the Solid Waste Authority, or SWA. Commissioners were voting on whether or not they would issue requests for proposals from companies to give their waste to the incinerator that is scheduled to open in 2015. The SWA is setting August as the deadline for awarding a contract. Many residents say the savings they would see from the plan is not worth the traffic congestion that would result from trucks importing waste. Residents also say that it would set a precedent for other parts of Florida, damaging the state's image. On Monday, Florida Governor Rick Scott stated in a letter that All Aboard Florida will not get any state subsidies for the $2.5 billion project. He also wants communities to have more time to weigh in on the subject. The letter from Scott was sent to All Aboard Florida's president, Michael Rainier, and clarified the state's budgeted $10 million will go towards safety upgrades at train crossings by local governments.
And that was from Next News Network. Now, when it comes to the gun stuff, one thing you don't ever hear in this statistics, and definitely when it comes to foreign countries that have banned guns, is the rate that other violent crimes go up, including rape, stabbings, beatings, muggings, all that, robberies at home, businesses being robbed, riots. You can even, look over at Britain, a lot of property damage. It doesn't deter violence, doesn't deter all these crimes. What it does is actually makes more people victims to these crimes because they don't have a way to defend themselves. And it doesn't get rid of violent crimes with guns. The criminals still have guns, and Britain goes, well, we only had this many deaths by, guns, not including when their officers might have fired at someone. But only this many deaths by a gun. But that also might not include the people that didn't die from a shooting. when we look at America and, you know, the experimenting or the passing of gun laws here in America in certain states and cities where basically impossible for you to own a firearm, we see more violent crimes. And they go, yeah, look, guns are coming in from other states. Well, these violent crimes are happening more, whether there's going to be guns or not. Because there are a lot of bigger people that will take advantage of the weak. And that's one of the things that always seem to be an equalizer. You don't have to be some big beef strong guy when you had a gun. You could still defend yourself. Well, the criminal have a gun still. Well, yeah, but that's a little bit equal playing field. Definitely when the legal owner, the person that, you know, has respect for their firearm and properly trained with their firearm can properly defend themselves. And there was that one I played earlier, and it was the one where the father stopped the two guys that came up to the daughter with the gun. And well, then, you know, he shot both of them, and then the mom grabbed the gun and shot and did not hit anybody. That's probably the one that went through the neighbor across the street's house, and I would say that's not properly trained. You know, even in a situation like that, you have to be able to properly aim and fire. You can't just be erratic, freaking out. It's one of those things that probably shouldn't have happened, and it does, you know, will be used against, you know, pro-gun people. Oh, look, see, could have killed that person across the street. It's never a good thing, but people still have the right to defend themselves. That doesn't change my right. That doesn't give anybody authority to abridge my right to defend myself. And that's the main issue. If you own yourself, if you believe in right that your body is your body and your property is your property, and you own yourself and you have the right to, you know, operate on natural law, and, you know, you can't look at it and go, well, you know, that might not be justified, or he should have that ability to defend himself. His ability to defend himself should only be limited to maybe a baseball bat, even though criminals still get guns. It's an idiotic argument, but it seems like we're being put more and more into idiocracy. And again, that the fear is, for a lot of us that are pro-liberty and nonviolence, something that, you know, many of us are always promoting. You know, there's better ways out. We don't need to go down this path of violence. And it seems that it's what the state is pushing. We don't need to go down this road. It's something that we need to spread the message better, because when these people don't understand that a free society is also based on nonviolence, and if you're advocating for a free society, that your violent actions, your aggression towards people is not beneficial to creating that free society, then we won't get there. Because people will keep snapping, and that's the fear. Is that these people that just, they can't figure out how to get past it. They just feel like they're in a corner. They're going to snap and lose it. And all that energy is going to be misplaced and be used to further the agenda of the state. They will use it to justify their authority, and I think that's exactly what you're going to see out of all this. And you see out of the USA Today article and the Southern Poverty Law Center. People snapping because of the direction society's headed. You know, these aren't people that are going, you know, I'm doing it because of this. No, they're doing it because they say basically that they have nothing, that they're losing everything, and they're snapping. And it's not justification for them snapping. It's misplaced, you know, knowledge, misplaced anger. And what we have to do is we have to learn how to spread the message that, you know, we can't do this with violence. Otherwise, what we're going to end up having is a violent revolution. And it'll lead right back to the same old thing. We'll create another government. That government will continue to become more and more tyrannical. And, you know, our children and our children's children will go down the same path. We hope maybe a couple generations will get to live in somewhat of a free society before it turns to shit again. And we just can't have it. We have to evolve past this eventually as a species. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. It is coming up to the end of the broadcast here. You know, always check out UCY's Amazon store. Go to ucy.tv and there's a little button right there, Amazon symbol. And great gear, prepping and survival gear and radiation gear. All kinds of great stuff. And when you do that, that helps support ucy.tv, which gives me and the other hosts on this network such a great platform to broadcast our ideas and news from around the world. And there's so many different voices here on this network, and you can get a wide variety of ideas and expand your, you know, ideology to your own beliefs. And it's always something that we have to continue to have these debates, and we have to continue to discuss these things to further ourselves as a race. And it's always great to have so many different voices and really try to get down to the nuts and bolts of, you know, what we need to do as a society to change things. And like I say all the time, it really comes down to us as individuals. You know, we can't change the world unless we're willing to change ourselves. And, you know, another thing is you don't stop learning until either you give up or you die. And I intend to keep learning to the day I die. So that furthers me. And I think if every individual looks at it that way, it helps them out too, and it helps out society. Stay tuned here on UCY.tv to try this at home with Dana Martin, and then Boiler Room Radio with Jim Funky after that. Take care. Have a great week.